This podcast is brought to you by Giant Food. And today, more than ever, they are committed to you because we are all in this together so we can continue to share the little things that matter.
Recorded live from the lobby of the Line Hotel in Adams Morgan, Washington, D.C. Full Service Radio is proudly supported and hosted by Simplecast, the easiest way for a podcast creator to publish and distribute audio on the internet. For more information, visit simplecast.com.
Peace, everyone, and welcome to the Edible Activist Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa L. Jones, broadcasting live from the lobby of the Line, D.C. This podcast is where dynamic people of color in the food and agriculture space share their personal food journeys, passions, and perspectives that stem from the land, all exemplifying the spirit of activism in their own edible way. Let's get started. Peace and welcome to the Edible Activist Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa L. Jones, broadcasting here on Full Service Radio. So what were you doing at the age of 10 or 11? Well, if you were like me, I was probably on the playground, at the swimming pool with my sister, or maybe even climbing a tree. Yes, I did climb trees. But Myra Jackson, a former electrical engineer and now Earth advocate, was becoming what she calls a young astronomer, walking the San Diego terrain with her grandmother, spending time at tide pools, fossil hunting, and diving into life sciences. Myra had established a relationship with the Earth and realized that she would be at service to her. Currently, Myra serves as an expert of the UN's Harmony with Nature program and has been coined the title Diplomat of the Biosphere. Welcome to Edible Activist, Myra. I'm so happy to talk with you today.
It's good to be with you. You have your own notoriety that I personally have enjoyed. So it's really good to be here with you.
Oh, I appreciate that. And, we were connected through a really awesome, amazing mutual friend. I have to shout her out, Jamie Rothberg, who I still stay in contact with. She's all the way over in Costa Rica. I was actually supposed to go visit her in June, but, given the climate, we don't know, hopefully, maybe, I'm not sure, but grateful to her. And because she's always bridging me with just dynamic people. So definitely have to shout her out and say, hey, Jamie, and thank you. Thank you for making this conversation happen.
I know Jamie would be doing it tenfold. She's a fan.
She is. She's a huge fan.
Mm-hmm.
So, Myra, we are in I keep calling it weird times, and I don't want to, I hate using the word weird so often because I don't want to discredit some of the good that's being pulled out of this, but also just being sensitive to those who don't look at this as a great time for them. If anything, this is a time where we are all being forced to really connect with the surroundings around us, right? So when I go take my walk, the folks who are saying, oh, more people are playing outdoors now. You see more kids, doing the soccer thing and, they're taking walks. And that really is a thing. I'm out in my neighborhood and I'm seeing way more people out enjoying nature, looking at the birds. Literally, I'm stopping at every flower. And that's just always been me, right? But we are all definitely developing a relationship with our surroundings because now we have to, because we have these stay-at-home orders, right? And we're staying home and we're making sure that we're protecting the vulnerable and trying to shield ourselves from this virus. But it also has put us in this position to connect with the outside as much as we can, even if it's just a mile radius from your house or, around the block. And for a long time, I'd still been defining my relationship with the earth defining my relationship with agriculture, defining my relationship with the soil, and just the grid around us. And again, at a young age, you really just had this opportunity to, like I said, or like you said, you were becoming this young astronomer, and where you lived in San Diego in California, and just had the privilege of having a grandmother, a generation who just knew what the earth was saying to her. And so I definitely just want to start this out by having you define your sacred relationship with the earth. And yeah, because it's, again, you have a deep relationship with the earth, and I think all of us are definitely cultivating that relationship even more.
I do. I've never had a chance to really talk about it with anyone. And yet it's something that was being conveyed to me by my parents, by my grandparents, and it caught up with me. It was in me, and I never had to think about it. There were the walls of my home, but the walls of my home included all this nature around me. And I felt safe in it. We would roll out of the door of our home with my mother always saying, look, remember, you're no better and you're no worse than anyone else. We went out with a lot of confidence into that world, and we could play all day long in the surrounds of the neighborhood, the nature, the canyons, our lawns. And this was the way it was. We all did this. We'd tap back in for naps and lunch and head right back out. There was as much play as there was solitude and time, just being with the sky and with the earth. And for me, I had this setting that was on a big scale. When we moved up the hill when I was 8, I felt like I could touch the sky. I was looking at the ocean. I was looking at the mountains. I was looking at the lights on the little hill in Mexico. And I was looking north to all this expanse that wasn't yet the big skyline that it is today, but it was more farmlands, and you could see hint of the river valley in San Diego. So this filled me, and I felt a part of it. That's the key. Not only did I feel a part of it, I was living with this deep sense of awe and wonder all the time. I would rush out my door on an adventure. There was a sense of adventure in my life. And I was curious, and I was meeting up with that adventure.
Wow. When I'm so blessed, and I've said this many times before, but I have the honor and privilege of still having both sets of my grandparents in my life. And I remember sitting in my Big Mom's tiny little living room over in Jackson, Mississippi over the summertime. And, they grew up on a farm. And my grandfather, who I affectionately called Big Daddy, who grew up in Mississippi, in Canton, the country in Mississippi. And he says, Melissa, we were talking about water sources, right? And he said, we used to take a peach tree, a limb from a peach tree to find our water sources. And there were no implicit instructions. It was just that they came from a generation who had this deep connection with the earth and with the grid and with agriculture, that they knew exactly where to find the water source, because they had that relationship with the earth. Again, there were no instructions. There was no internet. There was no Google. There was no YouTube. But he said, this is how we lived off the land, because we talked with the earth and we were in harmony. We were in harmony with the earth. So when I was listening to your conversations about you taking your walks with your grandmother and her having established that relationship that was just already just there, with that generation, I really thought back to that, and I was just like, wow, so not present here. So not present here. We have many folks obviously who control our water source, and all of our sources, for that matter. But I definitely thought about that, and I said, wow, sitting in my grandparents' living room, I said, oh my goodness. So, definitely just want to touch more about moments with grandma, and just everything that she, not everything. I know there was a lot, but it's like you pulled so much from her, just taking those walks and realizing the surroundings that you were in, and just her pointing out things. I was listening to the other podcast that you did, Listening with the Earth, and I pulled so much from it, Myra, so much from it. I downloaded some of your guides off your website, and I was just like in awe. And, again, just spending time with a generation who had that relationship. So you can just tap more into that, just moments with grandma and what else that was like and what else you pulled from her.
I'd love to, because, in this way, this is where those relationships that we have continue. And it's easy for me to hear her voice. And I've been enjoying, kind of, just as you were asking and talking about your own grandparents still being alive and still having access to the doorways to the senses that are innate, that are part of our original design, that allow us to have this sense of communion. I really watched my grandmother not only as she walked me through the canyons, because it was daily that we would take these long walks, and she would come and visit us in California, and later came to live with us. And it was like, I would rather go walk with grandma when she was doing her walk than play. So that's how much I learned. And I was a sieve for everything that she was giving. I remember this day, once we had moved on the hill, and as we were walking on top of the hill, she said to me, "This was underwater." And I said, "Grandma, this was underwater. There's the ocean. We're way above the ocean here." And she said, "Look down, child." And I looked down, and she said, "Just go down there and just rub a little bit and see if you can bring what it probably looks like a rock to you there, huh?" And she had me rub and rub and rub, and all of a sudden I realized it was a seashell.
Wow.
And there were seashells all over the land.
Wow.
And, it was her paying attention. Always, it seemed that nothing got past her that was going on in the world. It was constant communication happening. And, when we walked, we would come back with food. There were edibles all throughout the canyons. And she would be able to point out what to pick, what not. And I saw fruit come home that I'd never seen before, like pomegranates,
Wow.
also called crab apples. She would call it crab apples. And we would bring those home and bust those open. But this is a woman too that could tell me what the weather was going to be. And I remember one day she said, "Oh yeah, we got about 2 days, before we're going to see more rain." And I remember her sticking her tongue out, but what she was testing what she was seeing on the ground, and that was the worms out. And some of these worms had surfaced, and she said they surface before the rains come. And it blew my mind.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I studied worms in school later because of my grandmother, who didn't have book learning, telling me what was going down. And this is the kind of connection that I realize we've lost. And over time, I've looked at how we've lost that connection. We've lost the ability to recognize food that is intended for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. A raccoon still can go and determine what is GMO corn versus the corn that comes from the wild root relatives.
Absolutely.
And we have to have a label because our senses are so dulled. But I saw her interact all the time with her senses to tell me what was ripe and what was not by taking it up to her nose and smelling it and then feeling it and then sometimes licking. She said, sometimes eating some things with your food, which they would still do, you get a little plate, get some greens on that plate, little pot liquor from the pot, and that cornbread,
Mm-hmm.
and it just speaks to you to mush it all together and bring it up with your hands. And she said, it's that touching the mouth that lets us know when we're done eating.
Wow.
There's a relationship to the hand, to actually the hand being involved with the food, cooking the food, eating. And of course, most of the time we were using utensils. But I saw this going down and she gave me that explanation. And it just gave me such an appreciation for our design. And that's what I could see with my grandmother when she would work the garden, that she was always harmonizing in some way with many aspects of what would seem separate in life she saw as a part of the whole. She grew flowers intentionally to make certain her garden was healthy and would survive the planting and the growing phase so she could harvest and eat those vegetables or fruits. And she was doing that in a very, now strategic way. But to me, I was just blown away by all this knowledge, including with medicinal plants.
Mm-hmm. I think about my grandmother, because my other grandmother lives not too far from Big Ma, and she eats with her hands all the time. And then when I find myself doing it, or when I see my mother doing it, it's just a repetition of what we've,
Yes.
of what I've seen and what I've known, because we still eat the cornbread, we still have the greens, we still call it pot liquor, and mash it all together.
Yeah.
And I have the grandmother who actually, even she's frying a piece of like fresh fish or some potatoes, slice some potatoes, and she'll pull one out of the skillet with her hand. To this day, my grandmother's in her 80s, just to taste it. I'm like, Grandma, do not stick your hand in that hot pot. And she's just like, I've been doing this forever. I'm fine. But everything is with her hands. Everything is with her hands. Every single thing. Wow.
I think that's why there was so much aloe vera always growing around my grandmother's kitchen. Because they used their hands, and aloe vera would take care of anything in case it got too hot in the kitchen.
Yes.
The steam was the one, but I know they'd know where to pick up the tail of that fish, which would stay. The heat would fall off of that pretty fast.
Yep.
They knew where to grab that.
Yep, absolutely. That's Grandma Catherine for you. That's Grandma Catherine for you. Well, I definitely also want to touch on your role and learn a little bit more about that, because and break down expert of the UN's Harmony with Nature program and the title that you've been coined Diplomat of the Biosphere. Because what does all of that mean? I know it means greatness. But if you can break it down for those who just want to get a better understanding of what your role entitles and what that title, what the weight that title holds, just give us a peek inside of that. That would be awesome.
All right. So here's the truth. The Diplomat of the Biosphere title came out of my study on planetary boundaries with Stockholm Resilience Center. And they thought, I think, that it was really cute to come up with these crazy titles right at the end, except I've never been one to think much of a title. I've never been contained within a title.
Of course.
I
Yeah.
have this sense of sovereignty that I don't even, now I know where I got it, but at the time I never thought about asking for permission or authority. But this title was something to really grow into, because I asked the same thing at first, like, that seems like exactly what we need to be doing, is checking in with the earth, with this, with creation itself, to find out how to design, how to organize, how to build. And that voice does need to be heard. And so I just took it on and said, this is something to grow into. There's not many titles aside from mother and daughter, and granddaughter and all of that means so much to me. And, I decided to really let that lead me in how I was walking in the world and interfacing with these global bodies, policy making bodies that make decisions that impact all life. And what I really knew is that if we were going to be living according to that original design, and this original design for the planetary being we call Earth, which I see as alive. How could I not see it as alive? It was speaking to my grandmothers and speaking to me. And I really knew that conversation that was going on between my own grandmothers mediated how they saw themselves and the reverence they felt for life. And I knew that harmonizing around that was important. It was concrete and grounded. It wasn't somewhere and somewhere else. We often come to our own religious ideals or our spirituality by thinking about something far away from where we are. After all, much of it characterizes the earth as if it's hell. And that's why dirt, the language of dirt, is, considered so pejoratively, when the soil is the soul. If you were with my grandmother, you could feel it and you would know it without her even having to, she wouldn't have to preach that.
Wow.
You would know that. It would be conveyed and transmitted by the way she walked with reverence and how she knew who she was, no matter what the world might have been saying. And you ground yourself in that, you see? So she had learned how to build that muscle in a world that degrades the earth and everything that lives close to the earth. We've been on that track. And that's what's so powerful about this time. And particularly now, the global pause is what I call it. Mm-hmm. And it is like the mother sending us to our room. I feel the Diplomat of the Biosphere title and the work that I do with Harmony with Nature is about that return to our right senses, this relationship with the earth that is reciprocal and one of harmony, that is balanced according to this wonderful design, which I really do feel has the inherent codes of paradise. Because if you spend any time with nature and you feel yourself comfortable out there, and I have to say, many people don't. Many people don't feel safe like I feel safe in nature. They're afraid of their own primordial nature. And if we're afraid of that, we certainly can't allow anything close to our brilliance and our luminosity to come into our life and shine in. And so I feel all of this really is a way of what our embodied presence is all about, and that is being able to walk with heaven on earth. Whatever ideas and notions we have of it being far afield and in another time in which we cross over, no. I see the intention of all life is harmonized to that higher octave of seeing, being, and knowing, that it's inherent in all creation, this beauty, this profound beauty, this profound sense of equanimity and this equanimous nature that includes all life. You see, I don't believe, nor do I know or see any evidence when I'm in nature of there being anything that the sun doesn't shine upon.
Wow.
And so this is what I feel is we need to bring this world of which we're a part of and we're independent to, and to the center. The metrics that measure the economy will fail us always because it doesn't consider that with which we're independent and a part of, that which supports and makes possible any way that we walk well in the world. You see, these ways that we measure put us in a survival bubble, and all we're ever looking at is how to survive. We don't look at how to thrive. I felt my grandmother, and you have to, the limits that have, come upon people who the soil, the color of the soil is the color of their skin, literally.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
Literally, the extraction we've done to the soils of the earth, we've done to people. And it really has been about color in the way that it has been meted out. And so I find it, and I had this strong experience when I was 4.5 years old of feeling such a love for the color of my skin. I turned one day after having this journey with my rabbit and found myself holding onto my right arm, kissing it up and down, admiring, almost in the way that my grandmother would admire that rich, healthy soil, because she always started with making sure that soil was rich and enriching. When she'd walk down a path, she was clearing it, making sure all the life there was able to live and breathe. She seemed to know her role and her place in this creation, no matter what was being said. And she could hold that field of sovereignty with great reverence and grace. And I still draw upon and abide upon that space she holds to inform how I walk. And that makes me resilient and strong. And I do feel an exuberance in this time.
Wow.
Same way I feel when the clouds, there's lightning and thunder. I love feeling the power of creation show itself.
Wow. We're going to take a really quick break and we will be right back. You're listening to Perfect Day, produced by Artists Authentic. For more of Authentic's work, visit allornothingstudios.com. This podcast is brought to you by Giant Food. Whether you are concerned about diabetes, heart health, losing weight, or just want to improve family meal times, Giant has a team of nutritionists ready to help you make the best decisions to meet your health and wellness goals. You can check out their personalized consultations online or by phone. Just go to giantfood.com/nutrition, or they have nutritionists who are available to answer any of your questions at nutrition@giantfood.com. All right, so welcome back to the Edible Activist podcast. I've been chatting with the wonderful Myra Jackson, who serves as an expert of the UN's Harmony with Nature program and is the diplomat of the biosphere. And we have, I've just loved that we connected through a mutual friend who in the same space of food and love for nature and love for environment, and just getting to understand Myra's just really deep, her deep connection with the earth, and just the reverence that she has for nature, and just taking us along this journey of walking with grandmother who just had the census to agriculture and the grid and their surroundings in California. And one thing that we ended off on just right before we took the break, Myra, you talked about us being in what you call a global pause, and that Mother Nature has sent us to our rooms, warranted, I will say. I'm sure there's a stronger word. And because, when I think of reciprocity, and that's something that we haven't seen between our relationship. And when I say our, I'm just generalizing us in general, because we haven't been nice to her for a very long time. And so with this global pause, and just thinking about what Mother Nature needs from us, is this it? And if so, all I can think about is, and I remember having this conversation with our dear friend Jamie, and actually Jamie brought this up, what happens next? Do we go back to beating up, maybe that was a harsh word, but I'm just calling a spade a spade. When we think about agriculture, when we think about what we've been extracting from the earth and, destroying our soils, do we go back to the same thing? Obviously, we know the answer. We don't want to, and we shouldn't. And it's funny because I actually just saw an article. I think it just came out yesterday. It might have been, I can't remember what distributor it was, but it was talking about how the food system is broken. And all I can think about is that you broke it, and it has already been broken because you broke it a long time ago. And so with this global pause, is this what Mother Nature needs? Is this us giving back to her? Because we've been taking for a very long time.
Yeah, it's really a good question. What I see is this is like a pilot study that's being led by the Great Mother herself.
Wow.
And the reason I say that is because, let me tell you, for the 20 years that I've been in the global policy making rooms where I've been trying to figure out how to halt the impact of our hubris on the climate, they've been talking about technology, been talking about how much money, and so the problem has continued to accelerate. And it's been accelerating, and it's not been a matter of it not being known. The effects of our behavior, particularly the way that we spew carbon into the atmosphere, into the living space that we all depend upon, the biosphere, has been known. Since 1962, there was a White House study that laid it out. So what was expeditious to do was to just turn that over and pretend it didn't happen and make sure you keep a controversy going so no one never catches pace.
Right.
But what happened, I lived through that, remember? I'm old enough to have seen us come out of a more connected to more local sources of food and water, by the way, to a time in which we saw water being bottled in plastic. And in the beginning, it had to be sold to us. We had to become accustomed to it because it didn't taste right. Drinking water out of plastic was rejected in the beginning, just like mothers who were forced to bottle feed their babies in the beginning were told, you don't want to look like you're primitive, do you? So there's always been the kind of messages that come along to move people away from what makes sense or what they've known to something that the market wants you to have. And so we've had this long progression in this space of becoming consumers and not thinking about why we do what we do and if it's in harmony with any kind of natural laws. But that's been a long arc anyway. It's been long happening. With a lot of life has been lost and misused and devalued as a result of the kind of thinking that really benefits a few. That is the system. And in some way, what we need to look at is, where have we become complicit in that kind of thinking? Because if we continue with that kind of thinking, the things will not, we know where that's going. So this global pilot that's been given to us is a sign that says, no, no, no. It's not about you spending trillions of dollars, nor is it about you writing new laws. It is about halting, changing your behavior. And guess what? You thought you couldn't do it, but look at what you've been able to do in the pause.
Right.
So what did we see? Fossil fuels dropped to below zero. They were paying people to move oil. You've already seen what you never thought would be possible. So here's what's happening. It's a very magical time. The impossible becomes possible. The earth has shown us. I saw a shining photograph of Los Angeles without smog over days and the waters being purified. We have the record all over the planet where communities have moved to flatten the curve in response to COVID-19, which, by the way, is a living virus that shuttles DNA and RNA. And viruses always show up this way when there's toxicity and where there's poison in the environment. It will balance out and move material. Viruses have always evolved life. Even viruses in a garden are something to watch for. So this is part of natural processes. And of course, anything that happens naturally can be capitalized upon in all kinds of ways. But the key is the agency we have is asking ourselves, are we going to adjust to those norms that we were operating under before the pause? Or are we going to continue to move with the earth, the great mother, and be disruptive? So that in this disruption, we find a foothold of global coherence that is in harmony with nature. Can we align all of our systems, all aspects of our lives, to come into alignment with what some would call natural laws or universal laws? I'm in the latter. And I was reminded of Martin Luther King talking about creative maladjustment. He said, I'll never adjust to a system that is not in harmony with natural laws. So I will not adjust. And I'm proud not to have adjusted. And I never heard those words in the way I heard them when I reviewed them and ran across them again a couple weeks ago. That is like an instruction, a pointing out instruction for our time. And the other I think is important is to think in terms of Ubuntu. And that is to recognize, coming out of the African philosophy out of South Africa and throughout Africa, really, through all the nations of Africa, there is some form of Ubuntu, of recognition that everything that we come in contact with, ourselves and the other, that our own humanity is bound up in how we care and how we value the life we encounter because it's connected.
Wow. Myra, how can we continue to listen to the earth? How can we develop that sense of, connection? It may not be like from the generations of our grandparents, though I do wish. But how can we continue to listen to her and just look to her for the signs and just be in harmony. You know, it's remarkable to see the many like food projects that are taking place. You know, there's a food advocate who is building garden beds for tons of residents out in Richmond, Virginia, who I'll be talking with. The seeds are flying off the shelf, right? And people are getting more outdoors. But how can we take it a step further beyond the garden bed? I remember talking with you previously before you and I had a conversation a while back. And I remember bits and pieces of our conversation. And I remember you saying that when you go on walks, you know, you use a mandala, and just really the importance of knowing, you know, your watershed, which is another conversation that I had with another gentleman who's a plant grower, and just really knowing what plants, you know, would grow around your area in your neighborhood. But just with all that said, like how can we take it a step further and just really have that ear for what she's saying? And she's been talking all along, you know, every time every time I hear of an earthquake or, you know, or just anything, I'm just like, she's talking, she's speaking. But, you know, on a personal level, in a personal capacity, what can we do? You know, how can we listen? How can we develop that deep relationship with her?
Oh yeah, it's so crucial. This question has a lot of juice to it. It's the
I
very
know.
question. It's the question we actually, when I wake up in the morning, it's always the same. I always ask and invite in what do I need to know? What's for me today to bring my attention to? I know that I'm connected to the earth and I live that way. I know that the best information I can receive and the higher order of my thinking comes from this connection I feel. It means everything. And so the wonder and awe I hold incessantly is this awareness that we're wired, we are made to know.
Mm-hmm.
Like the elephants knew to go uphill when that Indonesian tsunami hit.
Do you know, I just learned that when I listened to your show, the show that you did. I said I was blown away. And I told you I downloaded one of your guides off your website and I was just blown away. I did not know that.
Yeah, we almost lost 300,000 people, Melissa.
I knew about the tsunami, but what I didn't know about was the elephants, like their sense to know that something was happening and they went upward because this was coming. That part just blew my mind.
And that is one of the ways that we know what's going on always. I lived in California. I could sense earthquakes coming. I could smell the sulfur. I knew when the frogs started leaping out and things started happening, we were going to be within 24 hours having an earthquake.
Wow.
The signs are, you know, if we were paying attention and connected, we would pay attention when the birds go silent or when they flee, or when the elephants go uphill, because in Indonesia, that's exactly what happened. The farmers saw the elephants go up. They didn't hesitate.
Wow.
They went, they followed them, and those were the lives that were saved. This is what we need to know, is if we're paying attention, and yes, our senses are dulled. We've been eating food the body can't recognize. We overload our senses with artificial lighting. We don't sleep well. We are completely offset from the rhythm of the earth. When we're walking on the earth, we're usually insulating ourselves from the touch and feel and the energetics of the earth. So we're cut off 10 ways to Sunday. And this is what we need to know is that, and this is what happens naturally. This is why gardening is so therapeutic in such a way to have your own sense of communion that connects you to life itself, is that there's something that comes away that is not captured in the conceptual mind. It's felt. It's a
Wow.
felt sense
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, something just shifted in the environment. Let me stop and ask, what am I to know about that? So this becomes a part of the daily attunement process. And you mentioned my mandala. I was given a mandala that said, if I took care to notice seeds, water, bees, trees, soil, for starters, there's many others, but those are the 5 that I was given to put in my mandala, to pay attention to. So when I go into local communities, because I travel a great deal prior to the pause, and when you're in these new locales, you always have to orient yourself. My job, wherever I go, was to first reconnect to the rhythm of the earth in the place where I am, to the circadian rhythm. I never had jet lag because I knew how to do that. Put my feet on the soil where I was, stand in the sun. That would just take care of my body would then
Right.
synchronize to the earth and the land and the place that where I was. Because really, I don't live according to calendar time or time as we've meted it out. The time that matters is sunrise and sunset for me. And so that was something that was really strong with my grandmother. I noticed she was always in the rhythm with the earth. In her home, you didn't wake up at the clock, you waked up before the sun rose.
Right.
And
Right.
that was it. And then, so this is the way we find our way to understand that these bodies, if they're working optimally and they're working in a way that we are in communication with the mother, then we sync up our bodies to that. And the first place is water. Why? Because here's the facts. 71% of the water on the earth is covered with oceans and fresh water. But of the 71%, only 2.5% is fresh water. And of the 2.5%, 2/3 of that is bound up in the ice cap and the glacial polar regions of the planet, leaving less than 1% of what you and me and semi-aquatic and other wildlife use to live each and every day. And humans walking on the planet are so hubris and audacious that we can walk around on the earth thinking that it's okay not to know where the source of our water is and how clean that water is. But I tell you, just taking that on to set up a list of earth metrics, Human 101 items to be aware of would change the way we think and see our world. It would change the nature of the decisions we make and how we're relating to each other. We have communities today, and I worked as an electrical engineer at San Diego Gas and Electric, and the playbook said, if you're going to put a power plant in a neighborhood, choose one that is of color, choose one that is Catholic.
Mm. Wow.
Those kinds of facilities were built in communities where they felt no one would be paying attention or go to the hearings because they were required before placing any of those facilities to have hearings. And what was the assumption around that? Is it could be pushed into those communities, which is why COVID is hitting communities of color more aggressively, because the body is already undermined and overwhelmed by toxins. And this is the truth of climate change, that it will hit and harm those least responsible
Yes.
for creating the conditions.
Yes. Yes.
But the thing is, we're all in it together. We're all complicit. And we, even though we may have fallen, our senses may have become dull just a couple generations ago, no matter what they were living through. There was a predilection to ground oneself, to find oneself in relationship to the land. And that is a That is an important place of reestablishing the original design.
Such a great conversation, Myra. You are I'm just going to say book for now. There's a word much greater to describe, really. Just you are a wealth of information. And I am very honored to have connected with you on this second time via phone, via remote in our virtual world now. And I just really appreciate all of your words. And I've learned so much. And I do really feel that this conversation will penetrate the minds and hearts of those who listen, and especially during this time right now, which is super, super important. And I'm grateful for the global pause. I am. I'm happy that we can allow our mother nature, our earth, to take a break, because this was a long time coming. And I've always been sensitive to the climate realities that have presented itself because of the way that we have extracted from the earth. So thank you so much. Thank you so very much. This was amazing. For those who want to connect with you, where can they find you, Myra?
I hide a lot.
I
really don't
know
try
where
to
to
be
find
out there.
you.
That pulls me away from nature, but I would say that, how could you find me? I really
You know
do
what?
hide.
That's okay. That's okay. How about this? If anyone has a question, they can filter it through me, and I'll try
Yes.
my best. If you're able and
Yes.
willing, we can make that happen, right?
That would be the perfect way.
Perfect. That's okay. And that's okay to have boundaries. It is totally okay. It's totally okay. Boundaries are allowed. We don't have enough of them. Okay. And it took me almost 30 plus years to learn boundaries. Okay. So I totally get that. All right. Well, before you go, you can't hide from these questions. They're just rapid fire questions. And I hope you're ready for me.
Okay.
They should be super easy. Super easy. Okay. So what is your favorite veggie?
Give me potatoes, but I tell you, not without my dark greens.
Ooh.
I crave dark greens.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So my grandmother. My grandmother's like, I love my vegetables. She's all
Love
about
them.
the
All
collards,
of them.
All right. What is your favorite fruit?
Watermelon, to be honest with you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you don't get it all year round, so and to find a good one, you really get picky when you love your watermelon. You
Yes,
want
you
it
do.
right.
You are tapping on it. That's my
That's
mom.
right.
Make sure you hit it. Is it hollow? I'm like, lady, you might want to come do this, okay? I want the yellow meat. Okay, they don't only have red. Well, make sure it has seeds in it. Okay, all right, I
Right.
gotcha.
Gotta have the seeds in it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so sweet, spicy, sour, salty, savory, or bitter?
I have to have them all.
Mm.
Every day, the best meals, the most satisfying meals, the ones that keep me happy, healthy, is when I have all five tastes, and I do it intentionally. Now, if I lean towards savory and spicy, but I have to have it all.
Okay. All right. So what do you do for the bitter?
Oh, the bitter is easy. First of all, I love my coffee, and I love chicory coffee. I love arugula.
Oh, yes.
I'm crazy about arugula. I crave
Yes.
it. It's not hard for me to get the bitter in at all.
I can
All
eat
the cruciferous vegetables, I love all the cauliflowers and broccolis and Brussels sprouts. All those are bitters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it all. Love it. I'm right. I'm right with you. I'm right with you, sister. I am. All right. Last question. Myra, one action step someone can take towards edible activism.
I tell you right now, given what we talked about today, it's important not only to eat locally, but to eat seasonally and to try as best you can to also drink the water from where you live, because the protection from the earth comes when we are honoring and we're reverent of what we're eating, and that we're eating from the place in which we live. That immediately supports our health and our wellness. We want to be lit and luminous. when we're walking on the planet. If we're going to
Lit.
be walking in harmony, we want to be lit. So how you eat, the prescription's already there. This is honoring the organization of the earth as it is. What we need to be eating is what grows locally, and we also need to drink from the water that's flowing from the springs.
Oh my gosh.
So eat seasonally.
Thank you so much, Myra. It has been a privilege. And thank you all for listening. Peace and have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We are here live on Full Service Radio every Wednesday at 11 a.m., where you can catch today's episode on fullserviceradio.org, as well as iTunes and Spotify. Be sure to follow me at Food Talks in Color on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Are you an edible activist? Sure you are. Come join me on the show. I would love to feature you. Just shoot me a DM on the gram. Peace and blessings all. And remember, there is no culture without agriculture.